Imagine standing at the narrow pass of Thermopylae, surrounded by thousands of enemy soldiers, knowing your fate is sealed, but determined to fight anyway. This was the moment that defined King Leonidas I, a warrior king whose name would echo through history as a symbol of courage and defiance. Yet behind this legendary figure stood a man of flesh and blood, shaped by the unique and unforgiving culture of ancient Sparta. To understand Leonidas, we must first understand the society that forged him. Born around 540 BCE into the Agead dynasty, one of Sparta's two royal families, Leonidas entered a world where his destiny was predetermined from the moment of his first breath. His very name, meaning lion-like, foreshadowed the fearless leader he would become. As a younger son of King Anaxandridas II, Leonidas was not initially expected to inherit the throne. This position in the royal hierarchy meant he underwent the standard Spartan upbringing, an experience that would profoundly shape his character and prepare him for his future role in ways his elder brothers never experienced. At the tender age of 7, like all Spartan boys, Leonidas was taken from his mother's care and entered the notorious agoge, Sparta's brutal educational and training system designed to transform boys into the finest soldiers in the ancient world. This separation marked the beginning of a lifelong dedication to the state, where individual desires were subordinated to collective needs. The young prince would have slept on reed mats, endured freezing winters with minimal clothing, and learned to survive on meager rations, often supplemented by food he had to steal, an exercise in cunning that was encouraged, though being caught resulted in severe punishment. The agoge was no mere military training program. It was a comprehensive system designed to instill unwavering loyalty, physical toughness, and mental resilience. Young boys were organized into packs, age-like, led by older youths, creating a hierarchy where obedience and leadership were simultaneously taught. Physical training included running, wrestling, and weapons practice, but equally important were lessons in music, dance, and recitation, all designed to foster group cohesion and cultural identity. Punishment was swift and harsh for those who failed to meet expectations. Public floggings were common, often administered at the altar of Artemis Orthe, where boys were sometimes whipped until blood flowed freely while they maintained stoic composure. These rituals served multiple purposes. They toughened the boys physically, taught them to endure pain without complaint, and demonstrated their worthiness to join the elite ranks of Spartan citizenry. Unlike many Spartan princes who might have received preferential treatment, Leonidas experienced the full rigor of this system. His royal blood offered no exemption from hardship, and historical accounts suggest he excelled within this demanding environment. By adolescence, he had developed into a formidable warrior, skilled in the use of spear, shield, and sword, and indoctrinated with the core Spartan values of discipline, simplicity, and unwavering courage. Leonidas' path to the throne came through an unusual series of circumstances. His half-brother Cleomenes I had inherited the crown as the eldest son, while Leonidas remained in the background, continuing to serve as a Spartan warrior and commander. However, Cleomenes' reign ended in scandal and apparent suicide around 490 BC, following a series of controversial military and political decisions that had alienated many within Sparta. With no direct heirs, the crown passed to Leonidas, who by this time had married Gorgo, the daughter of Cleomenes. This marriage was significant not just for its political implications, but because Gorgo herself was renowned for her intelligence and wisdom, qualities highly respected even in Sparta's male-dominated society. Contemporary accounts suggest she served as a trusted advisor to Leonidas throughout his reign, providing counsel that complemented his military expertise. Upon ascending the throne, Leonidas inherited a Sparta at the height of its military power but facing growing external threats. The Persian Empire under Darius I had already attempted to invade Greece once, defeated at Marathon in 490 BC. But everyone knew this was merely a temporary setback for the world's greatest empire. Leonidas likely spent the early years of his reign strengthening Sparta's military readiness and navigating the complex politics of the Peloponnesian League, the alliance of states under Spartan leadership. To appreciate Leonidas as a leader requires understanding the unique social structure he presided over. Sparta was unlike any other Greek polis, having evolved into what historians often describe as a military state. At its foundation was a rigid class system. The Spartiates, full citizens, form an elite warrior class, supported by perioikoi, free non-citizens who managed trade and crafts, and helots, state-owned serfs who performed agricultural labor. This system allowed Spartan citizens to devote themselves entirely to military training and state service. From age 20 to 60, Spartiate men lived in barracks, even after marriage, visiting their wives primarily for procreation. They dined in common messes, syssitia, where they contributed equal portions of food and engaged in conversation that reinforced Spartan values and group identity. Women in Sparta enjoyed more freedom and respect than their counterparts in other Greek states. They received physical education, could own property, and were expected to produce strong children for the state. Leonidas' wife Gorgo exemplified the Spartan woman, educated, outspoken, and fiercely patriotic. A famous anecdote relates how, when asked why Spartan women were the only ones who could rule men, she replied, "Because we are the only ones who give birth to men." Governing the society was a complex system balancing various powers. Leonidas, as one of two kings, the other from the Eurypontid dynasty, shared authority with 5 annually elected overseers, ephors, and a council of elders, gerousia. The kings led armies in wartime but had limited domestic authority. This diffusion of power created a stability unusual in ancient monarchies, though it could also hamper decisive action in times of crisis. Leonidas embodied the ideal Spartan king, austere in lifestyle, disciplined in conduct, and unwavering in his commitment to Spartan values. Unlike leaders who ruled through fear or promises of wealth, he commanded respect through personal example. The laconic, brief, concise speech associated with Spartans was especially evident in Leonidas, whose reported sayings demonstrate a sharp wit and profound wisdom compressed into few words. When news reached Greece that Xerxes, son of Darius, was assembling an enormous invasion force, Leonidas recognized the existential threat this posed not just to Sparta but to all Greek city-states. Despite long-standing rivalries, particularly with Athens, he worked to forge a united Greek resistance. This task was complicated by the reluctance of many states to commit forces, especially during the Olympic Games and various religious festivals. The decision to make a stand at Thermopylae reflected both strategic necessity and Leonidas' understanding of Greek geography. The narrow coastal pass presented one of the few locations where a small force could potentially hold off a much larger army, especially when coordinated with the Athenian navy at Nabae Artemisium. By controlling this choke point, the Greeks hoped to prevent the Persian advance into central Greece while buying time for additional forces to mobilize. In the months before the battle, Leonidas devoted himself to diplomatic efforts, attempting to secure commitments from as many Greek states as possible. He consulted the oracle at Delphi, which reportedly gave the grim prophecy that either Sparta would fall or lose a king. Understanding the implications, Leonidas made the fateful decision to lead the advance force personally, an unusual step for a Spartan king, who normally would be kept in reserve for decisive engagements. As a massive Persian army approached in the summer of 480 BCE, Leonidas found himself confronting not just a military challenge but a moral one. According to Spartan law, the city should not send out an army during the Carnea festival. Additionally, the ephors were reluctant to commit Sparta's full military strength so far from home, fearing Helot rebellions or attacks from rival states. Leonidas resolved this dilemma by selecting just 300 Spartans, all fathers with living sons, ensuring their family lines would continue, to accompany him, along with several thousand allies from other Greek states. This force was never intended to defeat the Persian army outright, but rather to demonstrate Greek resolve and delay the invasion long enough for the main armies to mobilize. The night before departing for Thermopylae, Leonidas reportedly enjoyed a quiet evening with his wife Gorgo. When she asked how she should behave in his absence, he replied with characteristic Spartan brevity, "Marry a good man and have good children." In these few words lay the acceptance of his likely fate and his hope for Sparta's future, a personal sacrifice subordinated to the greater good. As Leonidas led his small force north toward Thermopylae, he carried more than his shield and spear. On his shoulders rested the legacy of centuries of Spartan tradition, the immediate survival of Greece, and ultimately, though he could not have known it, the future memory of what courage means in the face of overwhelming odds. The hot gates of Thermopylae awaited, where this king, already remarkable for his background and leadership, would transcend into legend through one final, defiant stand. What enabled Leonidas and his men to march knowingly toward almost certain death? The answer lies in the philosophical foundations of Spartan society. From childhood, Spartans were imbued with the concept of arete, excellence or virtue, and philotimo, love of honor. These values formed the core of their identity, creating warriors who genuinely believed that a glorious death was preferable to a life of dishonor or defeat. Unlike modern societies that often celebrate individual achievement or personal happiness, Sparta prioritized collective well-being and state survival above all. Leonidas internalized these values so completely that when faced with a choice between retreating to fight another day or standing firm at Thermopylae, he chose a path that best served Sparta's reputation and Greece's chances of survival, regardless of personal cost. This outlook was reinforced by Sparta's unique religious practices. While sharing the common Greek pantheon, Spartans particularly venerated Apollo and Artemis, deities associated with discipline and coming of age. Before battle, kings would make sacrifices to determine divine favor, a ritual Leonidas performed at Thermopylae. When the omens proved unfavorable, rather than interpreting this as a reason to retreat, he recognized it as confirmation of what the oracle had already foretold. His death was necessary for Sparta's salvation. As we stand at the threshold of Thermopylae, preparing to witness Leonidas' final hours, we can now appreciate the complexities of the man himself. He was not simply born a hero, but shaped into one through the unique crucible of Spartan culture. His leadership derived not from charisma alone, but from embodying the values his society held sacred. His decision to stand against the Persian onslaught stemmed not from recklessness, but from profound understanding of his duty as king and the strategic necessities of the moment. The transformation of Leonidas from historical figure to legend will begin with the events at Thermopylae, but the foundation for that transformation was laid long before, in the harsh training grounds of the agoge, in the complex political environment of dual kingship, and in the unwavering cultural values that prioritize state over self. Before he became a symbol of resistance against tyranny, Leonidas was a product of society that, for all its harshness, created leaders capable of extraordinary sacrifice when circumstances demanded it. As the Persian forces appeared on the horizon, vastly outnumbering the Greek defenders, Leonidas stood ready, a king prepared by lifetime and lineage for this moment when the fate of Western civilization would hang in the balance. The battle that followed would test every aspect of the man behind the legend, revealing the true measure of Spartan virtue in the crucible of combat against impossible odds. As the massive Persian army under Xerxes advanced southward in the summer of 480 BC, the Greek alliance faced a critical decision. where to make their stand against an enemy whose numbers seemed beyond counting. The narrow coastal pass of Thermopylae emerged as the optimal defensive position, a geographical bottleneck where the mountains descended almost to the sea, creating a passage barely wide enough for a wagon to pass through. Here, the overwhelming numerical advantage of the Persian forces would be neutralized, allowing the disciplined Greek hoplites to maximize their impact. Thermopylae, whose name means hot gates due to the natural hot springs in the vicinity, represented more than just a tactical position. It stood as a gateway to central Greece, guarding the route to Attica, Boeotia, and ultimately to Peloponnese. If the Persians broke through, Athens would lie defenseless, and the other Greek states would be isolated and vulnerable. Moreover, the nearby Strait of Artemisium allowed for coordination between land and sea forces, with the Athenian navy engaging the Persian fleet while Leonidas and his men held the pass. The force Leonidas assembled at Thermopylae was modest compared to the full military potential of the Greek states. His famous 300 Spartans, all handpicked veterans who had fathered sons to ensure their family lines would continue, formed the elite corps. They were supplemented by approximately 7,000 allies drawn from other Greek cities, including 400 Thebans, 700 Thespians, and contingents from Phocis, Locris, and several Peloponnesian states. This number fell far short of what would be needed for decisive victory, but the mission was never designed for conquest, only to delay the Persian advance long enough for the main Greek armies to mobilize after their religious festivals concluded. When Leonidas arrived at the pass and surveyed the terrain, he immediately set about strengthening the ancient Phocian wall that guarded the narrowest section. Behind this defensive position, he arranged his forces in a rotation system, ensuring fresh troops always faced the enemy while others rested. The Spartans, as the most disciplined and heavily armored warriors, would anchor the Greek line in the most critical moments of combat. As scouts reported the approach of the Persian host, Leonidas prepared his men not with lengthy speeches but with spare, practical directions and the calm demeanor that had earned him respect throughout his reign. When the Persian advance guard first sighted the small Greek force of the pass, they reported back to Xerxes, who reportedly could not believe that such a modest number would stand against his mighty army. According to Herodotus, the great king sent a messenger demanding that the Greeks surrender their weapons. It was then that Leonidas delivered one of history's most famous laconic replies: "Molon, labe, come and take them." This defiant response set the tone for the resistance that would follow. The first day of battle dawned with Xerxes, having waited for days in the hope that the Greeks would retreat, finally ordering his troops forward. The initial assault featured Median and Kissian troops, followed by the Immortals, the elite Persian royal guard. Wave after wave broke against the disciplined Greek phalanx, where soldiers stood shoulder to shoulder, their overlapping shields forming an impenetrable wall from behind which their long spears struck with deadly efficiency. The narrow confines of the pass negated the Persians' numerical advantage, forcing them to attack in limited numbers that the Greeks could manage. When standard tactics failed, Xerxes sent in his Immortals, expecting them to quickly dispatch the defenders. Instead, the Spartans employed a feigned retreat tactic, appearing to break ranks before suddenly turning to slaughter their pursuers. By day's end, the pass remained firmly in Greek hands, and Persian bodies carpeted the approach. The second day brought more of the same, with the Persians unable to make significant headway despite suffering mounting casualties. Xerxes, watching from his elevated throne, reportedly rose 3 times in anger as he witnessed his forces repeatedly repulsed by the smaller Greek contingent. The disciplined hoplite formation, combined with superior armor and weaponry specifically designed for close-quarter combat, proved devastatingly effective against the light-armed Persian infantry. Each rotation of fresh Greek troops maintained the defensive integrity of the line, while Leonidas coordinated the overall battle with tactical precision. The stalemate might have continued longer had fate not intervened in the form of a local Greek named Ephialtes. Seeking reward, this man approached the Persians with knowledge of a mountain path that would allow them to circumvent the pass and attack the Greek force from behind. Despite attempt by Leonidas to guard this route with Phocian troops, the Persian detachment, led by General Hydons and guided by Ephialtes, successfully navigated the path under cover of darkness. When dawn broke on the third day, Leonidas received word that his position had been compromised. The Persians would soon close like a vice from both directions, making the Greek position untenable. Faced with certain defeat, Leonidas made a momentous decision that would forever define his legacy. He ordered most of the Allied contingents to withdraw and fight another day, while he and his Spartans would remain to cover their retreat and fulfill their duty to the last. Not all chose to leave. The Thespian contingent, led by Thermopylae, elected to stand with the Spartans rather than abandon their allies. The Thebans, whose loyalty had been questioned, were compelled to stay. Together with the remaining Spartans, they prepared for their final hours. Leonidas, understanding that their death was now inevitable, allegedly remarked that they should breakfast well, for tonight we dine in Hades, another example of the grim humor that characterized Spartan military culture. As the main Persian force attacked from the front and Hydon's detachment approached from the rear, Leonidas made a final, bold decision. Rather than waiting behind their defensive position, the remaining Greeks charged into the wider part of the pass, seeking to kill as many Persians as possible before being overwhelmed. In the ensuing melee, Leonidas fell early, triggering a desperate struggle for possession of his body. For times, the Greeks drove back the Persians to protect their fallen king, demonstrating their absolute commitment to the Spartan code that a king must never be left on the battlefield. Eventually, exhausted and vastly outnumbered, the last defenders withdrew to a small hill where they made their final stand. Here, surrounded on all sides, they fought with whatever weapons remained: swords, daggers, hands, and even teeth, until the last man fell beneath a hail of Persian arrows. Xerxes, in his fury at the resistance that had cost him so dearly, ordered Leonidas' head impaled on a stake, an act that violated Persian customs of honoring brave enemies and revealed how deeply the Spartan king had undermined the great king's sense of invincibility. The Battle of Thermopylae, while a tactical defeat for the Greeks, achieved its strategic purpose. The 3-day delay allowed the Greek fleet to retreat in good order from Artemisium and gave additional time for evacuation of Athens and preparation of defenses at the Isthmus of Corinth. Perhaps more significantly, the psychological impact of the stand reverberated throughout Greece, transforming what might have been capitulation into determined resistance. As news of Leonidas' sacrifice spread, the seemingly invincible Persian army suddenly appeared vulnerable. If 300 Spartans could inflict such damage, what might the combined forces of Greece accomplish? This shift in perspective proved crucial in the months that followed, particularly at the naval battle of Salamis, where the Greek fleet defeated the Persian navy, and ultimately at Plataea, where the main Spartan army, led by Leonidas' nephew Posenes, decisively defeated the Persian land forces. For Sparta itself, the defeat at Thermopylae represented both loss and vindication. The death of a king and 300 of their finest warriors was a significant blow to a state with perpetually limited citizenry. Yet the manner of their death, unflinching in the face of certain defeat, perfectly embodied the Spartan ideal that had been instilled through generations of harsh training. When the survivors returned to report that the men had died obedient to their orders, they confirmed that the system had produced exactly the kind of warriors it was designed to create. The fallen were honored with unprecedented reverence. While Leonidas' remains were not recovered until 40 years later, when they were returned to Sparta for proper burial, a stone lion was erected at Thermopylae to commemorate the king, and a famous epitaph composed by Simonides was inscribed at the site: "Go tell the Spartans, stranger passing by, that he, obedient to their laws, will lie. In Sparta, the names of the 300 were recorded and their families granted special honors, while annual ceremonies celebrated their sacrifice. Even before the Greco-Persian Wars concluded, the story of Leonidas and the 300 had begun its transformation from historical event to cultural touchstone. The earliest accounts, including that of Herodotus writing less than 50 years after the battle, already contained elements of mythologizing, specific dialogue, dramatic scenes, and emphasis on symbolic moments that may have been embellished for effect. This process continued through antiquity, with poets, orators, and historians returning to Thermopylae as a quintessential example of courage against overwhelming odds. In Sparta, Leonidas was elevated to heroic status, with a cult established in his honor. Every year, funeral games were held to commemorate his sacrifice, and his supposed final words were recited by generations of Spartan youths. Even as Sparta's political and military power waned in the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, the cultural memory of Leonidas remained vibrant, a reminder of past glory that sustained Spartan identity long after the reality had faded. Beyond Sparta, Leonidas became a pan-Hellenic symbol of resistance against foreign domination. During the Hellenistic period, as Greek city-states fell under Macedonian influence and later faced Roman expansion, the example of Thermopylae provided both inspiration and consolation, a reminder that moral victory could transcend military defeat. When the Romans finally conquered Greece, they too adopted Leonidas into their cultural pantheon, recognizing in his stand the same virtues, courage, and excellence they claimed for their own heroes. Throughout the centuries that followed, as empires rose and fell across Europe and the Mediterranean, the story of Leonidas endured, periodically resurfacing whenever people faced existential threats from more powerful enemies. During the Renaissance, with its renewed interest in classical learning, Thermopylae became a standard reference point in discussions of patriotism and sacrifice. Jacques-Louis David's painting Leonidas at Thermopylae, 1814, captured this neoclassical fascination, depicting the Spartan king in a moment of calm resolution before the final battle. The 19th century, with its romantic nationalism and glorification of ancient virtue, saw Leonidas invoked in various liberation struggles, from the Greek War of Independence to nationalist movements across Europe. For emerging nation-states seeking historical validation, the Spartan stand represented an ideal of national character worth emulating. In America, the comparison between Thermopylae and the Alamo became a cultural commonplace, with defenders in both cases transformed from defeated soldiers into martyrs for liberty. The 20th and 21st centuries have witnessed both continuity and change in how Leonidas is remembered. During World War II, both Allied and Axis powers referenced Thermopylae to bolster morale, the former emphasizing resistance against tyranny, the latter promoting military discipline and sacrifice for the state. The Cold War saw similar appropriations, with Western democracies and communist states each claiming to embody the true spirit of Leonidas while casting their opponents as the new Persian despotism. In popular culture, Leonidas has experienced a remarkable resurgence through films, novels, graphic novels, and video games. Frank Miller's graphic novel 300, 1998, and Zack Snyder's film adaptation, 2007, reintroduce a story to a global audience, albeit in a highly stylized form that emphasized visual spectacle over historical accuracy. These modern interpretations have been criticized for historical liberties and ideological undertones, but they have undeniably rekindled interest in the historical Leonidas and prompted valuable discussions about how we use the past to understand our present. Scholars, meanwhile, have engaged in more nuanced reassessments of both Leonidas and the society that produced him. The Spartan system, once uncritically admired for its discipline and martial prowess, has been increasingly scrutinized for its reliance on helot labor, suppression of individuality, and inherent militarism. Similarly, modern military historians have questioned whether Thermopylae truly represented sound strategy or merely glorious sacrifice, suggesting that the past might have been held more effectively with a larger force willing to retreat when outflanked. Yet despite these complexities and reconsiderations, Leonidas remains a compelling figure precisely because his story transcends simple categorization. He was simultaneously a product of his culture and an exceptional individual who, when faced with the ultimate test, made a choice that continues to resonate across millennia. In a world of shifting values and uncertain commitments, the image of someone willing to stand firm on principle, regardless of consequences, retains its power to inspire. What can contemporary leaders learn from Leonidas? First, and perhaps most fundamentally, the importance of leading by example. Unlike Xerxes, who observed the battle from a distant throne, Leonidas fought alongside his men, sharing their dangers and hardships. This participatory leadership created a bond of trust that no amount of compulsion could match. Second, Leonidas demonstrated the crucial balance between adaptability and principle. Throughout the battle, he adjusted tactics in response to changing circumstances, rotating troops and modifying formations as needed. Yet when the moment came to decide between retreat and last stand, he remained unwaveringly committed to his core mission and values. This combination of tactical flexibility and strategic constancy represents leadership at its most effective. Third, Leonidas understood the power of symbolic action. By choosing to remain with his men when he could have withdrawn to fight another day, he created a moral example that transcended the immediate military situation. Great leaders recognize that how they act in crisis often matters more than whether they technically succeed or fail, that inspiration can outlast a feat and continue to shape events long after the immediate outcome is decided. Finally, Leonidas exemplified the leadership virtue of clear-eyed acceptance of reality, combined with determination to act effectively within its constraints. He harbored no illusions about his likely fate once the past was outflanked, yet neither did he surrender to fatalism. Instead, he made the most meaningful choice available within those constraints, maximizing the impact of a situation he could not ultimately control. 2.5 millennia have passed since Leonidas and his men made their stand at the hot gates. Empires have risen and fallen. Technologies have transformed human existence, and value systems have evolved in ways the Spartan could never have imagined. Yet something about this story continues to compel us, to make us pause and consider what it means to face overwhelming odds with dignity and resolve. Perhaps it is because Thermopylae speaks to something timeless in the human condition, the tension between individual mortality and the causes that transcend it. Each of us, like Leonidas, must ultimately face our own limitations and finitude. The question is whether we meet those limitations with the same clarity of purpose, the same alignment between our deepest values and our final actions. Or perhaps the enduring fascination lies in the paradox of the heart of the Spartan stand, that defeat can be victory, that ending can be beginning, that death can generate life. When all seemed lost at Thermopylae, something intangible was gained, a demonstration of human potential that has inspired countless acts of courage in the centuries since. Whatever the reason, as long as humans continue to face seemingly insurmountable challenges, whether on battlefields, in struggles against oppression, or in confrontations with our planetary limitations, the example of Leonidas will remain relevant, not as a simplistic model to be uncritically emulated, but as a complex historical moment that continues to illuminate the depths of human capability when purpose aligns with action. At Thermopylae today, a modern monument marks the site where Leonidas made his final stand. The ancient hot springs still flow, and mountains still frame the past, though the shoreline has moved through centuries of geological change. Visitors come from around the world to stand where the 300 stood, to try to imagine what it meant to face such odds with such resolve. They leave carrying something of Leonidas with them, not just a memory of a battle long past, but the reminder that even in our most desperate hours, how we choose to stand makes all the difference. Subscribe and welcome to the Empire.